Experience. Hello, welcome to Retro Rides podcast. We're back, and this time we have Jonny Smith, a man of many cars and much car-related goodness. Fifth Gear, Smith and Sniff. We've got fully charged episodes, so we'll go into some electrical car business later on. But we know
electrical car business.
That is what we do, and. We know he has an enduring love of all things retro, so we figured he was an ideal man to chat to. So welcome to our little podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I'm pleased to be part of it. I like the Retro Rides family. Always have.
Yes, you have. You've been around for a while on the forum.
I've been around. I'm an observer. You know, I'm an observer. I dip in, I dip out. But I think
that's all good.
I tell you what, actually, in this weird, bizarre time that we're experiencing of isolation at the moment, actually forums, I reckon, are going to have another big boost.
Yeah, we've noticed
in the same way that podcasts kind of plateaued off for a few years, I reckon, and podcasts have taken off again. It's like people have forgotten about them and then realised they're really good. I think forums are going to do exactly the same.
Yeah, well, not to descend into Retro Rides too much, but yeah, we pretty much kind of almost doubled our page views on the forum in the last month. So I think that tells you something. Yep. Went from 4
Go on,
million...
David, blow your trumpet. Blow your own trumpet. Do it. You're allowed to sometimes.
No, it's fine.
You felt so uncomfortable when I did that.
People would be surprised at me not blowing my own trumpet, but yeah, it's fine. Forum's
You're
awesome,
a modest gentleman,
but not my fault that the forum's awesome. Maybe sometimes.
If you build it, they will come.
Yes. Well, we've got I've got a podcast coming up with Simon Coulson, Armad of the forum, and we are going to talk about the history of why it came about and all of that good stuff. So that's something for people to, I guess they look forward to, but actually I suspect I've probably put it out before putting this one out. So if you listen to that, it was hopefully enjoyable. I'll tell you later.
You're trying to manipulate history now. That's just impossible.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to build a time machine and make things better. Or maybe I already did.
I'm sat doing this podcast in my spare room / office, and I've got a load of stupid little car toys in front of my desk. My desk is really cluttered, which is a good thing that you can't see it. I've got a slightly unfinished Airfix VW Beetle plastic kit to my right, next to my mouse. In front of me, I've got a Matra Rancho Corgi model. Hang on. Yeah, it's a Corgi Matra Rancho made in England. And weirdly, I found it under a church pew in my local church on Harvest Festival, at my kids' Harvest Festival about 4 years ago. And I just picked it up and it was mint. I live in a small village, and one of my mates said to me, he said that was totally mine. He said, I lost a Matra Rancho in church when I was about 7. And I was like, what? It's been under there all that time. So I have this. I didn't give it back to him. I refused.
Yes, legit.
So I've got that. I've got a Hot Wheels. I've got an AMC Pacer with blue tinted windows. What's that? That's a Corgi Junior. And I've got an Audi Quattro Matchbox. Oh, look at that, 1982. Oh, what a car! I don't know why. Just a pathetic reminder every time I type something on my keyboard that I work in the car industry.
Well, actually, that leads me on to a good question, which is traditionally my first question that I wrote down about 6 years ago when I first started doing podcasts, and the whole idea was I was going to interview people, and then it was just me and Simon talking nonsense about cars, and I never got to interview anybody. But my first question is, why cars? Why are cars important to you enough that this is now your job as well? But surely there must have been a point at which you were
where the light bulb went on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just finished filming in my garage day before yesterday with my first car, doing a little YouTube video on it, and I had the same kind of question in my mind of like, how did it all come about? And I think it came about. It was a combination of things. I'm guessing it was a combination of the usual influences of what you like watching on telly when you're a kid. And of course, I was a kid born in '79, so I was a child of the '80s. So of course, you had all of the stuff like A-Team and Dukes of Hazzard and Fall Guy and all the '80s extreme action stuff. And then I remember loving Herbie. I used to obsess about Herbie, loved Herbie, and I think that's why my first car was a Beetle. That in combination with Tamiya, loving the Tamiya radio control models, understanding how they worked. It was like you owning your own car before you could own a real car. So there was that when I was, when did I get my first Tamiya? 10. I was always good at English at school, and I grew up around. My dad was an engineer. A structural bridge engineer. In fact, you live in Somerset. My dad moved to Somerset to help build the M5 motorway.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of the bridges that went over the M5, my dad was involved with back in the 60s.
Oh, thank your dad next time I drove up the M5.
Yeah, well, there you go, you see. So that's why my dad moved from Leicestershire to Somerset and then consequently met my mum, and he thought he was only going to be down there for about 5 years, get a good promotion, then move somewhere more interesting, and he's still there. He's still there. So I think my dad being an engineer and my brother having an engineering mind. My brother is now trained as a precision engineer, and he works with vintage cars. My brother was always more about the oily bits, understanding how cars worked. I was more about the look of them and the way they may or may not drive, and the style and the colour and the adverts. And at school, I realised quite early on I was terrible at maths, and I found science quite challenging, and I was good at English and art. And I thought, well, I'm going to do something to do with writing or drawing. And yeah, I think I did work experience at secondary school on a local paper and a local graphic design department. And then I did work experience at college on a VW magazine called Volkswagen, which is still going.
That's interesting. So that was straight from college. You went to Volkswagen. What were you doing there? Just sort of running type stuff? Or
it was just
anything?
It was a week's work experience. I managed to get my foot in the door, and I didn't live anywhere near Croydon where they were based. And my mum or my dad drove me there, and I stayed in a B&B on my own. And for a week, but it had such a profound effect on me. It sort of made me realise, it confirmed this is what I want to do. I want to work in magazines. And I forgot to point out that from about 1989, 1990 onwards, I used to religiously get car magazines. If I did chores around the house. So my mum would buy me Volkswagen, and that was the air-cooled Volkswagen mag that I just obsessed over, and made me want to work in magazines. I loved the whole part. I loved everything about magazines. The fact that you travel, the fact that you could really analyse a car, the fact there were new cars, there were old cars, there was comparisons, there were stats. I don't know. I said I wanted to do that or work in the advertising industry. And I'm
glad you chose that rather than the advertising industry.
Well, yeah, and I did go to university, but only for about 9 months, because all through college, I was just constantly nagging magazines for to get my foot in the door, and I managed to get a job offer of a staff writer, junior staff writer, not long after I'd started uni, and I made the decision to quit uni about 10 months in to my degree, and that was it. I packed up. My dad came down to get me from uni in his Mark II Granada 2.8 estate. And the thing about my dad is you realise that we lived as a family. Our cars were always 2 generations behind everybody else's. It was almost, I don't think it was intentional, but if you think in the late 80s we had a late 70s car. In the late 90s we had a mid 80s car. So we were always quite far behind. And my
yeah,
dad was always mending stuff. My mum and dad are sort of mend and make do. And I think I picked up on that from quite an early age. Dad was on the drive a lot, tinkering with the car, and that was not abnormal. And that really resonated with me. That's why my brother, it does what he does now, because my brother got fully stuck in. My brother was, taking a clutch out when he was 10, whereas I was a bit more like, hey, I'll clean it and I'll learn to drive on a piece of waste ground, if that's right, Dad. So we would do that. But yeah, I think that's how it happened. It was just a combination of working out what you were passionate about, working out what you were good at doing, hopefully, and then being really bloody persistent and just trying to get your foot in the door. And I still maintain to this day, if anyone's listening, because I get asked a lot, how do you get into an industry such as this? I think that you have to be really bloody persistent, and I would suggest either being able to offer your services for free for a while, and then some kind of totally forgotten the word, an apprentice, effectively an apprenticeship. I think an apprenticeship in the industry is far better than sheer achievements through academia, because every job I've ever had in this industry, no one's ever asked me what achievements I got at college, school, or university. They just said, well, show me what you've done in the last, I don't know, year. Show me your highlights of the last year or whatever. So I would still say the work experience I did had such a profound effect on me. And then badgering magazines to get some work published, which obviously I ended up getting. That was it. That was it. And I started working on magazines in 1998. So yeah, it was a while ago now. Yeah, over 20 years.
Yeah, I once listened to a show about how to get into movies that used to be on Radio 1 back when they had occasional documentaries in the middle of the evening.
Oh, was that slightly serious Mark Kermode?
That is slightly serious Mark Kermode. They asked the guy how to become a producer. And the guy said, well, you just tell everybody you're a producer and now you're a movie producer, because somebody will eventually come to you and ask you for money, and then you just need to go and find some money. And I used the same tactic to become a journalist for the car stuff very briefly. I just told people I could write, and I would send them stuff, and they would then ask me if I wanted to do a feature, and I did a feature and I got paid for it. And it was persistence, like you say. Just, you can become this thing. It's better if you can get some work experience, but you can become this thing by deciding that's what you're going to be, and then working at it.
And I think it's probably easier now than it ever was, because of the ability to self-publish on the internet. So
yeah,
before, obviously, I grew up. I guess you could call me a traditional journalist, because I'm from a traditional background of print, and when I started, digital cameras weren't invented. God, that makes me sound like such an old git.
Old.
But I remember we shot on transparency.
Yeah.
And then scan the transparencies, and that doesn't, the revolution of digital came about really quick, but it's totally about work experience and persistence. That's exactly, and being, I suppose, being confident in your own ability. And
yeah, it's a little bit of confidence as well, I think. But I actually, where were you working? That's what I was going to ask you. Where was your first actual job?
My first proper journalist job was on a small publishing house in Chester called Jazz Publishing, and they were a niche publisher who did tattoo mags, modified chopper, like motorcycle V-twin motorbike mags, and an air cooled VW mag called at the time Flat 4, and then it relaunched as Total VW.
I remember that.
And I worked on that for 3 years and became editor, actually. Yeah, in the last year. And that was that was absolutely my foot in the door of the industry. And it was, and I quickly realised that it's hard work. It's not very well paid. There's no set 9 to 5 kind of time, but it's never boring. Ever. It's never boring.
It's never boring. Yeah, no, that's for sure. And you went after that to where?
then I realised I wanted to kind of broaden out from just a niche classic car mag. I wanted to do more than just old VWs. So I badgered Classic Cars magazine. At the time, that was like on fire, that mag, back in the late 90s. Yeah. Managed to get a couple of pieces of work published in it, and then the editor agreed to meet me, and he basically said, look, I haven't got a job for you on the mag, but I'm actually leaving the mag, and I'm setting up a different department within the company to do contract publishing, where we're going to do classic car related stuff, we're going to do stuff with watches, we're going to do new car launch material, and we've got a contract with British Superbikes, World Superbikes, and British touring cars. Are you interested? And I'm like, yeah. He said, great. He said, great, but you need to move to London in the next fortnight. So I moved from Chester back down to London, where I'd been at university for 10 months, and was down there for another, whatever it was, 3.5 years doing that. And I quickly realised that there was no point in me driving a car to work. I realised that within a week. And so I started cycling again, even though I had like 4 cars. So I would supplement my. I'd already started doing this in Chester. I remember I would supplement my income by just buying and selling cars, because A, I couldn't resist finding a bargain anyway, and B, I knew I could buy a car if I bought it cheaply enough with the right with if my eye was true to me, I could make 100% profit on every car. So that's what I used to do. I used to buy, 300 quid car, sell it for 6, buy a 500 quid car, sell it for £1,000. And I used to do that constantly on the side, constantly. And when I was in London, I realised the Pandora's box was open. I moved to London when the scrap price was so low that people were abandoning cars, and I don't know if people remember that. I remember this would have been about the year 2000, 2001. So 20 years ago. And there, on the street where I lived, I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment, which was really expensive, but it was in a nice area. So it was a tiny apartment, but in a quite a leafy area, because I wanted to enjoy walking around and not getting murdered. So
it helps. But
it was great for car spotting. Like, there was an abandoned Merc S600 down my road, so the V12 S-Class, and it had smashed back window, and someone had gone through the glove box and stuff, but it was still a complete car, and it sat there for 4 months. No one went near it. I actually claimed a couple of cars. I worked out you could write to the council and
I remember
then
that.
write to the DVLA, and I actually claimed a couple of cars and saved them and did them up and sold them. My brother had an absolute corker. My brother, who lived in at that time in Bournemouth, someone dumped a Bedford Rascal down his road, a panel van, and he waited for about 2 months and nobody did anything with it. So he contacted the council and claimed it, broke into it, got the documents, and then put a new barrel and applied for the documents. And in the back was full of tools.
Oh my God.
It was full of tools.
How strange.
Yeah, he said it had a whole cabinet of tools in it. It was a bit freaky. Yeah, if anyone's listening and they're saying that was totally nicked, well, I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is it sat down his road for 2 months before he claimed it. But yeah, those were weird days.
Yeah,
in
I
London.
Remember, yeah, that was it was a strange time. There's somebody down my road had at the time what I guess is about 15-year-old MX-5, just decided not to MOT it and abandoned it, and then it just got towed away. But there's no value in it. It was just this...
No, scrap was so low, and there were classic cars littered all over the place. In fact, when I was at university, someone had dumped I think back now and it makes me slightly teary-eyed, a Volvo P1800 ES.
Oh, don't.
They'd abandoned it, and it had about 3 council notices on it. And I remember one time I cycled past it and went, I can't leave this. So I started trying to phone round all the local council departments to work out who the hell I needed to talk to try and save this car. And in the end, they were like, look, the car's going to be removed in the next 2 days. And it got taken away, and I bet it got blooming crushed. and
That
could not
makes me
believe it.
sad. Sad in my heart, that does.
So yeah, I mean, I saved a few, but
You did well.
yeah, and I bought some really interesting cars at that time on the, and if you remember the yellow paper, the Admart. London Loot was an absolute treasure trove. I bought so many cars out of London Loot. I bought everything. I bought an Australian Ford Fairlane V8. I bought from a film company that they'd used in an unsuccessful film with David Soul and Jack Davenport and that guy that directed the Rocket Man, what's his name, Dexter Fletcher. I bought a car off a film lot, which was a late 70s Cadillac that had been roller painted with magnolia.
Good Lord.
I bought it unseen for 150 quid, and it was as terrible as I thought it might be, but drove that around for a while. That was an 8.2 litre V8. It's the biggest V8.
That's an insane engine to have in
It was
anything.
the big. Well, yeah, and in London it was just a ridiculous idea, but I didn't drive it much because I cycled to work. But it was the biggest post-war non-limousine Cadillac ever made, and I bought it for 150 quid. Yeah, it was great. It was great, and I bought loads. I had just before I left Chester, I bought a Mark 1 Granada, lovely Mark 1 Granada 3 litre GL, and I swapped it straight with a guy in Wigan. I think he was in Wigan, somewhere like that, for a bubble car.
Of course you did.
And this bubble car had been in storage for years, but I managed to get him to deliver it as part of the deal, and got it running and spent a few months buying the parts that I needed, and then took it down to London when I moved and put it in a garage. I sold that car to Michael Barrymore.
Of course you did.
Yeah, and what was weird is I advertised it in the London Loot, and he was the one that phoned up to answer the ad, and I recognised his voice. It was a bit freaky, and anyway, I sold the car to him. I delivered to him. He asked me to deliver it. Like the week he was going to court because of the guy dying in his swimming pool. I mean, it was just weird.
Strange lifestyle to live. I think bubble cars actually were one of those things that just shot up in value for a little while. I don't know what they're like now, but I remember they went from being not disposable but relatively cheap to being tens of thousands of pounds like almost overnight. It was very strange.
I think it's the fact that they're funny little trinkets, and for car collectors who have got a lot of disposable income, it's something that they probably don't want to drive, but they like having it parked amongst their Exotica.
Oh, yeah.
I think they look funny next to a Lambo or a Ferrari or a Maserati, because you go, oh, well, because everyone, all those wealthy collectors have a Fiat 500 because Michael Schumacher had one, and because every sexy woman in the 60s drove one. But that's almost a bit cliche now. But if you want to go a bit, the BMW i7 was the one to go for. Or I had a Heinkel, I forget what it was called, a Heinkel cabin cruiser or something. But yeah, they're great. I love bubble cars. I always have done. I mean, they drive terribly.
You like small cars in general, it seems. You like tiny little cars a lot.
I'm sort of I bookend both sides, because at one point I had the bubble car and I had the Cadillac with the 8.2 engine. So I like extremes because I find them fascinating. So yeah, I like very small, very big. Well, I suppose with my electric Enfield 8000, I mean that's tiny. And at the same time, I have the Dodge Charger and the Impala, so they're both giants, aren't they? So yeah, there's not enough time, is there, to buy all the cars that you want to buy?
I've not got enough money, but let's face that.
Me neither.
Time is difficult.
I've had to turn a few down in the last couple of years because I've tried to be a good boy, because we've been saving for years to build a house, and not the house I'm sitting in now. We're going to knock down and then build it with a proper garage and everything. That's been the master plan for ages. I think COVID-19 might delay that somewhat. We were going to be demolishing it in about 6 weeks, so that's not going to happen. But yeah, I there's a lot of cars. There's a lot of cars out there, isn't there?
There are more than a couple of cars out there. How did you end up on television, Mr. Smith? This is what I want to know.
2005, I was working on Max Power, and
Wait, one second. Hold on. We will have to return to Max Power in a minute. Carry on.
2005, I was working on for that magazine, and the editor got a call from a production company making something for Sky One, and it was called Movies Greatest Cars, and it was a massive compendium show, like a 2-hour show, or like one of those list shows. 50, I think it was 50 greatest cars, and they wanted a representative from Max Power to talk about this and that and the other, and the editor didn't want to go on TV. And I just said, yeah, I'll do it. Do you know about these cars? And they sent me through a list of the cars they were going to talk about. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. And they said, we'll give you a couple of £100 and you can come down to London, sit on a stool and chat. And I was like, yeah, bollocks, I'll do that. And I did it. And the at the end of this sort of hour's chat, the director just said to me, he said, Jonny, I was really struggling to keep a straight face. Some of the stuff you were saying was really funny. You really did well there. Have you ever done this before? I said, no, never done it before. And they ended up using quite a lot of me as a talking head, which was, I think, that wasn't the plan. And when it went out, one of the producers of Fifth Gear, which was on Channel 5 at the time, saw it, and I had worked in the past and was friends with Tom Ford, Wookie Ford, who worked on Top Gear magazine and other mags, and Car magazine where I met him. And he arranged for us to have a lunch meeting, I suppose it was, over in Birmingham, where they're based. And I thought the meeting was just a meeting with lunch, and I turn up and they basically walk up to me with the camera already rolling and said, right, talk about the car that you've just turned up in for 10 minutes. Go. And it was totally unplanned. I guess that was the test. Luckily, I'm so glad I turned up in a car that I actually knew about or cared about.
Something interesting.
It wasn't just a Toyota Avensis hire car, but it was at the time, it was a Mark V Golf GTI, because they'd just come out and I was testing one. It was white, and I had a lot to say about it. And so I did that, and I heard nothing for about 2 or 3 months. Yeah, 2 or 3 months after that. And weirdly, in that time, I got made redundant. And so it was a strange situation where I got made redundant from Car magazine, as I was on then. And about 10 days after getting made redundant, as I was trying to work out, do I go freelance? Who do I work for? I got a call from Fifth Gear to say we really enjoyed your show reel that you did, and Channel 5 have seen it and they want to book you for an episode. And if you don't muck it up, you'll get another one. And so it was a proper one door closes, another door open situation. I was really pissed off at the fact I'd been made redundant. I was, a bit bitter with the world and trying to work out my plan of attack. And then this happened. So I was really thankful for that.
Yeah, and that, like life giving you a little kind of proper nudge in the
it was a test. Direction. It was a bit of a kidney punch, because they made me redundant when I'd clocked off for a week's holiday. And they made me come in. They made me come in on the Monday morning. They said, "You got to come in for an important meeting." I said, "I'm not coming in. I've got a week's holiday. This has been booked for ages." And the fact remains, all I was going to do is tinker with the car at home. It was like time off in lieu that I needed to take. Yeah. They called me in and just basically gave me an envelope saying, "There's no easy way to do this, but I'm afraid we've got to let you go." And it was me and 2 others. So. Yeah, I was very angry and put out about that. But ever since that's happened, I've always tried to turn a negative into a positive, because I think it's too easy to just be bitter about something and just stay bitter.
2005 would have been the start of the slow destruction of the magazine industry in the UK anyway. So you may or may not have been better off out of it, to be fair.
I actually think, and maybe I would say this, I think it was the best thing that happened to me, because without getting made redundant, I wouldn't have quit and gone self-employed, which opens the door to lots of stuff. But also it might not have let me start working in the TV world. And of course now I do more TV and video, YouTube related stuff than I do writing. So the seesaw has kind of swiveled the other way. And although I started with writing, I actually prefer doing videos now. I'm worse at writing now. I'm too rusty. I shouldn't say that, should I? But it's true.
Well, you've got to keep practicing, so people should definitely give you more stuff to write, and then you've
got to keep practicing. The reality is, I think there's better writers out there. I think I'm better off doing a podcast. Frankly, Dan.
Well, yes. I don't know. I'm torn on that. I have opinions on modern car magazine writing, but
are you going to save those for another day? Or
I shall probably save those for another day. Forever, probably.
It's a strange one. I have to say though, I'm really glad that I started my career when I did, because although I'm not old, I'm 41. I've been in that transition of analog kind of print media with analog photographs to digital pictures to then iPad editions, monetized internet, which wasn't a thing when I started, and then now the colossus of YouTube, and even the TV world's changed. Scheduled TV's not what it was, so now I'm doing work on or potentially doing film work on non-scheduled platforms. So it's great.
It's great.
It's interesting.
It's an exciting place to be. I want to revisit Max Power. As you're aware, actually, one of the first conversations I had with you was about the fact that I'm not a fan of Max Power and all that it was. But at the same time, it's quite a fascinating thing to have happened to the world.
Seriously, I'm not a Maxer in really. When I got the job on the mag, I got offered the job on the back of the other magazine work I'd done, and I first got the job on Revs as a features editor. And Revs, if you don't know, was the sister magazine to Max Power, which was slightly more hands-on and slightly less girl-orientated, I suppose. And we had a great time. And although the cars, the sort of style of cars and the taste of cars wasn't really my personal taste, it was from a human interest perspective and a culture perspective, it was awesome. I'm so glad to have been part of it. And it's weird now, people like you want the stories. They want, because Max Power is that long ago, people go, you've got to tell me about the story about this, or what happened there. And I joined Max actually quite late. Max had already kind of peaked, I think.
Yeah, I think 2000, 2001 was probably
peak.
Yeah, the Max lad culture. Because this is the thing that I have with it, is that I think that it was a car culture that came out of lad culture, rather than a car culture that evolved out of other car culture. Does that make sense? So like hot rodding, you can see evolving out of what the need to go faster and other car cultures, and even like the insane kind of Japanese Bosuzuku stuff is kind of an evolution of like the Group 5 racers and all that kind of thing. Whereas I think that Max Power came actually out of a kind of the laddish culture, and if you weren't into that, I don't think you could really get into Max Power.
Well, I think what I mean? if you look at social media, it predates social media. So for younger listeners, if you imagine a world pre-Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all those things, that what Max Power did was it created a tribe. It was a tribal thing where you would congregate at cruises and in car parks and on events, and obviously there's a chance to meet people of the opposite sex and peacock around in your cars if that's what you want to do. But I suppose it was just wanting to just get out and have a really good time. So there were those of them that just went along for the crack. So not actual crack. I don't mean like Class A drugs. I mean went along for the good time. And in the same way, I guess the way the rave culture was, there were people that just went along to it because they knew whatever happened, they were going to see some interesting things, and it was going to be a generally fun evening. And then you had the other side of the culture of people that built cars properly. They didn't just slap a few bits on and nail a car around. And that was the thing with Max Power. You had the sort of periphery people that just wanted a good time, and they bought a cheap car. They slapped a few bits on it, went big on the base and some bad wheels, and then and went out looking for girls. And then on the other side, you had people that poured 20 grand into builds and did it right, and it was that melting pot of those two people. The thing is with Max is because Max got so big, it snowballed into, people forget it was the best-selling car magazine in Europe by a long way, and it predated crazy. Of course, all the irreverence of what Top Gear became. I would argue, and I'm pretty sure I could get Rich Porter to admit it, I would argue that Max Power had an incredibly strong effect on the rebooted Top Gear of 2001. Because look at the challenges they did, look at the dicking about they did. Max Power was doing all that 5 years previous.
That's interesting, actually.
Max Power did it before YouTube and before that sort of thing. I mean, Max had a really big forum, huge forum. Yeah. But I think what happened with Max is it became too big. It became a cash cow for the publishing group, and they just milked it until it was sort of cool not to be like that anymore. And the whole chav culture, the backlash against the chav culture and the connotations of all that, I think that's what the start of the demise of Max was, a combination of that and a combination of young people being able to get brand new cars on credit that were already pre-modified to a point. The Mini One being the best example of that, because you could order a Mini One and there's 600 options on the options list. So you could basically customize a Mini One from the factory. You didn't need to then go and order a Kenwood head unit, and you didn't need to then maybe get lowering springs, because you could just order it with the Cup suspension or the Cooper work suspension or whatever it might be. So it was. I mean, I'm seeing a bit of a renaissance in it, which is quite nice in some ways. But
I think that there's people now that have grown old enough and distant enough that it's history, and they're interested in it. And there's the Max Power reunion guys and all that kind of stuff. I think that, I mean, I've got no disrespect for anyone that's building and enjoying cars. I just think that it was so tied into that kind of external culture. And actually, when that external culture became the thing that had started to disappear and there was a backlash against, it was so tied into it that it was inevitable that it would go.
Laddism had to die. It couldn't carry on, and
it took Max Power with it when it went, basically, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it sort of did. Max tried to diversify a little bit, but it came too late, and I wasn't on it by that point. But I'm very glad to have been on board the ship when we did some quite interesting stuff, and I was tasked with always trying to make features that the press would talk about, like, could we do something that was notorious that the Daily Mail would get hold of, that the BBC might talk about? And we did a burnout outside Parliament on the bridge.
Nice.
What
with?
It was an S14 Nissan Silvia. Japanese imported S14 owned by Dan Anslow, who's one of the Max Power reunion guys. Dan was like, Dan lived and breathed Max Power. We did it about 5 a.m. on a Sunday. We got all of the photographers set, and we got everybody set. I mean, think about it now, it was stupid. We could have got shot, but he did an absolutely glorious burnout on the bridge with Parliament in the background. It looked great. And it wasn't. It looked like we'd photoshopped it. That was the frustrating thing, but we really had done it.
You'd gone out there and done the thing.
Yeah. We did that. We took a radio control car on the A1 at lunchtime on a Friday, I mean, like, it's not a great idea, and I don't recommend it. But we did it. We were driving it from the passenger seat of. Oh, I was driving the Civic Type R, and the guy in the passenger seat was driving the car, the little radio controlled nitro car, I think it was. It was doing about 55 miles an hour, something like that, in the traffic.
There are no rules.
Well, we did some stuff that was silly, but I think that we were being challenged with being irreverent, and then and then it becomes unacceptable, I suppose, in its extremes. But my personal cars, when we were on the Revs Max Power journey, my personal projects were always more to my own taste, which was more the sort of hot rod low rider type scene.
Yeah. Well, so you got 64 Impala, so tell us about that. That's a long-term project, right?
The longest term project. That car I've had since 2004. So I bought that car when I was on Max Power. Yeah, I did. Shit, forgot about that. And I still have never driven it or started it. Still.
Oh.
So it's still not finished. Oh, it's stupid. I mean, it's stupid. It's the most money I've ever spent on a car. It's never moved, really. Don't get me wrong, it looks great. It's actually starting to look like a real car now. But yeah, it's been a love-hate relationship. That car's fought me. But it's my second 64 Impala. I had a factory right-hand drive 4-door when I lived in London. I sold my Granada Mark 1 lowrider to buy the Impala, and then I realised that car was more rotten than I expected, and a friend of mine had an SS which he'd imported from Oklahoma with no engine and gearbox from a salvage yard. And I always said to him, look, if you ever want to sell it, let me know. And basically he went bankrupt and phoned me I remember on New Year's Day. And he wasn't a close enough mate to sort of phone me on New Year's Day. And he phoned me and I went, all right, Steve, you okay? And he went, yeah, listen, Johnny, you still interested in this 64 Impala? We talked about it. And I went, yeah, maybe. Why? He goes, well, I need to sell it, and I need to sell it like now, in the next week. So I went, well, okay, give me an hour to think about it. And I did him a deal, and I did a killer deal, and I had myself basically a rolling, a complete bar the transmission and the engine 64 Impala Supersport. And
fantastic.
And then embarked on this ridiculous, bloody stupid journey of turning it into a low rider, but to a really high standard, I suppose. And I think that the high standard part of it is probably what's constantly made a rod for my own back. But
it's worth building a low rider to a high standard, because otherwise they constantly break, as far as I can tell. From my low rider friends.
Yes. Well, this is my third low rider, and so I've done a lot of learning, and it's just a bit weird that I started building it before marriage, family, all of those responsibilities, and now by the time I finish it, my daughter will be at secondary school, which will be might be an embarrassing dad style thing to do. But
that's amazing though. You got it right for that prom as well, right at the end. Nowadays we seem to have prom, so you can do the low rider prom.
Do you know what was really weird is my son the other night, just before bed, there was a song that came on the radio, and he said, "Oh, Dad, that's like one of those songs where, like, the guys are all gangsters and the cars are bouncing around and stuff." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I've got one of those cars." And he looked at me and went, "What? You got one of those cars that bounces?" I said, "Well, yeah, it's not quite bouncing yet, but I have, yeah." And I reminded him, because he hasn't seen it for about, I don't know, 3 years or 2 years or something. I said, yeah, that thing that I constantly talk about, the Chevrolet, the gold Chevrolet. He goes, "Oh, no way." And he quickly went into his sister's room and went, "Daddy's got like a low rider. Did you know that?" And she went, "Yeah, I knew that. Because she knows more about cars than he does. She's she's properly into cars. She's a car nutter.
So next generation, if I was to ever get the chance to ask why cars to her, it'd be my dad has a ridiculous car collection, and that's why.
She's always. I mean, ever since I can remember, she's really enjoyed playing with Hot Wheels, really enjoyed the car badge game, which we used to do when she was a toddler. We'd go for a little walk and I'd point at a car and I'd say, right, car badge game. And whatever I pointed at, she'd have to identify by the badge. That's a Vauxhall, Daddy. That's an Audi. That's a Skoda. She was amazing at it from about 18 months old. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, right now she's still really into cars. If I ever go to a car show, I'll ask the kids if they want to come with me. Almost certainly, my daughter will. My son sort of take or leave it. But my son's more into the building. I think my son's more like my brother. He's more about how you. If I'm in the garage here and I'm taking wheels off a car and trying to mend it, fettle it, he's involved. He's into it. Whereas she's more about going fast. So she loves Santa Pod. If I ever go to Santa Pod, or if I ever borrow a hot car, that's quick, she will always want to come out in it. Come on, Daddy, let's do this. She loves a bit of launch control.
Everybody loves a little bit of launch control.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna segue. Carry on. Sorry.
All I was going to say was I've always, as a parent, I've always tried to make sure that I don't press my passion and hobby on my kids, because it doesn't always stick, does it? And they've got they can tread their own path. But it's lovely to see that they do appreciate certain parts of it. Like 2 years ago, they were bored in the summer holidays, and I dusted off my Dukes of Hazzard box set DVD, and the kids, I thought they're just going to hate this. And I put it on, and they were both absolutely transfixed by it. They wouldn't stop talking about it for about a week. And my son found a General Lee, an old General Lee model diecast. I've got it up here in the office. He's like, Daddy, can I just keep that in my room now? Can I keep the General Lee in my room? So it's funny how some of the old stuff kind of really resonates with them. It does make me chuckle.
Yeah. There's a weird thing, like people keep on going, like kids now, they're not into cars, and all of these car prices are going to crash because no one's interested in buying older cars. But I'm like, but I'm interested in cars from like pre-war. I wasn't around then, like the age of a car doesn't really matter. It's just what they're evocative of for you, I think.
It's totally right. And it also depends on what you like about cars, what you're into. Do you want to actually want to play with cars and fiddle with them and modify them and mend them, or do you just want to drive? Because there's lots of opportunity, I think, there, and you just got to find something that engages them. My daughter, for example, just wants to go fast and race. She wants to go karting. She wants me to build her a buggy for the garden, and I'm trying to work out a way of adapting a golf cart at the moment, like shorten the chassis of a golf cart and put like a body on it of some sort. So it's electric, but it's
There's a reader's other mods for retro rides on there. Just pointing that out if anybody's for that section. The reader's other mod section seems to have a lot of stuff built for kids.
Tot rods.
Just general interest. People build stuff to come to the shows with and just drive around the campsite on.
Seriously, I need some of that.
Yeah, you should get involved.
Okay,
go and have a look.
It's maybe a project for my YouTube channel, especially given this time of isolation. I've got a couple of old lawnmowers, but ideally I'd like to do it electric if I can.
Do electric. So what is the thing with you and electric cars? Because that's on my list of things to ask Jonny Smith. Seeing as you own a Dodge Charger and you like electric cars, it's an interesting juxtaposition.
It is, isn't it? I don't like to conform is the honest answer, but and people feel like I get a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you're into electric cars now, Johnny. That means like you're one of them." And I'm like, "What do you mean one of them? It's like it's not Montagues and Capulets. It's not like if I'm into electric." I'm one of them. Well, if I'm into electric cars, it doesn't mean I'm going to sell my Dodge. It doesn't mean I'm going to not finish the Impala. It doesn't mean I'm not going to have, the V6 Allegro, because the whole point of this in my head is that day to day, most of the cars we drive are actually quite regular, quite boring. So whatever the tool for the everyday commute is, well, it makes so much sense when you look at your own journeys that electric can fit into that and work for you. It's better for the environment, but it's also better for your pocket. You know, charging a car and the cost of ownership on a monthly basis of an EV is lower, and I really, really love that torque delivery, that addictive torque delivery, the refinement of it. And my kids love plugging it in when you get home in the same way that you plug your phone in to charge when you get home. And it's not that hard to adjust to. And I think ever since I went to Japan in 2008 and drove what became the Leaf, at the time it was a pre-production car, and it had all the Leaf running gear in a Nissan Cube, and we were allowed to drive it. It was a feature.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. I wish they bloody built it. So yes. I drove this thing round Nissan's test track in Yokohama, and they said, "Look, this is not the finished car, but this is a drivetrain that we are developing for a car." And yeah, it was a second generation Cube with Leaf running gear, and this thing was quite quick and responsive, and of course beautifully quiet. And it was like, I guess I had a bit of a light bulb moment. I'd already had a bit of a fascination with EV performance, because while I was on max power, I'd heard about the White Zombie electric Datsun in Portland, Oregon, of John Wayland, and that was the car that
White Zombie actually.
I mean, the White.
About that car.
Well, the White Zombie was single-handedly the reason why I built my electric dragster, because I'm so amazed and respectful of what John Wayland was doing by turning up at drag strips and really pissing off Corvette and Viper owners with this Datsun that was running high voltage. And I thought, I need a piece of that. And I also thought, I want to be part of this future of maybe EV hot rodding. If EV hot rodding becomes a thing, I want to be part of it. And that was that and the combination of driving that pre-production Leaf in Japan was the start of this, of me thinking this is a future that I want to embrace. And I don't see it as threatening interesting piston cars. I see it as working with it, a fit for purpose situation. Which car is fit for which purpose? My Dodge is never going to be used as a daily driver because it would bankrupt me and I'd be a dick to drive that car every day. So that is my reward car. That is my 3,000 miles a year or whatever it is car. And so I see driving an EV every day actually as increasing my interest for classics. And it actually, the money I save from not spending on fuel doing the boring commutes, I spend on classic car parts. So
yeah,
you know,
makes sense.
I think so. I think it's not to be. I just wish people wouldn't keep EVs at arm's length. I think they just need to try it for themselves.
It's a weird thing because actually I'd forgotten about White Zombie. So White Zombie was what inspired me to, and I've never built it, but I always wanted to. I wanted to build a hill climb midget EV car.
Oh,
because it would make complete sense to me, particularly if it was one of the space framed all fiberglass jobbies.
Oh yeah.
So even back then, but it was weirdly renegade back then to have an electric car, and now it's become kind of mainstream. But
totally.
I don't. Yeah, I can see why people are a bit worried because they're worried for a future where they don't have the option to buy a internal combustion engine car, which I can kind of see. But then the cars they like already have all been made, so there's not like, if you like old cars, if you like classic cars, then there's no threat to the classic car market from electric vehicles unless they get legislated out of being allowed on the road.
I think they are going to, rather than a hindrance, I think they're going to be a help to the classic car world, because they're going to allow the peripheral classic car enthusiast, the person that wants the look but doesn't necessarily want the originality or of a car, or maybe that person lives in a place where driving an old car is outlawed because of legislation. It allows them to own a car they otherwise couldn't or wouldn't, and also
it's interesting.
Yeah, I think, and that is just another part of another strand of the classic car kind of community, I think, because you've already got your resto mods, you've already got your controversial stuff, you've got your numbers matching things, you've got your your really extreme sort of on the outer limits performance stuff. So why not have a bit of EV classic muscle in there as well?
Yeah, I think it's legit. I find it interesting with the EV West 911. So it's a Rollwelt 911, but it's fully electric. But they built it in such a way that if they wanted to put it back to being an internal combustion engine, they can. They've not cut anything, and I found that super interesting. Is that you can drop in an EV drivetrain kind of a little bit more sympathetically. That you can drop in, say, a V8 or whatever into something that didn't come with a V8. You know, like even dropping a 4-cylinder modern engine into something that used to have a 4-cylinder engine but not the modern size and packaging. You end up having to cut about bulkheads, but you could drop an EV drivetrain in there without having to do that, and you can readily put it back to stock if you so wished. So weirdly, it's almost more sympathetic to do that to a classic car than some of the stuff we're known for doing.
Yeah, I think it can be. I mean, it's still on the expensive side.
Crazy.
So you've got to really want to do it, and it depends what. But what it does mean is you can probably use that classic car more than you ever would, and I'm hopefully, I'm always going to try and champion those sorts of builds. In fact, I want to do one imminent. I'm going to try and do one imminently to a car of mine that makes it just way more usable on a daily basis. So it's not going to be quick. It's not a Hellraiser like the drag car was, but it's more of a real world car, and the engine in that car at the moment just annoys me. It's not a part of the car that I particularly like anyway. So if the engine pisses me off, take it out and EV it. So.
I think there's probably a whole episode of this podcast on EV cars that I should probably do at some point.
Well, I'm happy to come back if you'll have me.
That sounds good. I'm gonna. We're approaching an hour in, so I've got a couple of things I definitely wanted to throw at you to answer.
Throwing.
Where did Smith and Sniff come from? How did that come about? It's very entertaining, but it like on the surface of it, it doesn't look like it's going to be a winner, and then it absolutely is. It's just sort of two vaguely middle-aged men eating sandwiches in a car.
Well, Smith and Sniff, to those who haven't heard of it, is me, Jonny Smith, and my friend Richard Porter, who is a journalist and was the scriptwriter of Top Gear for years, and is now the script editor of Grand Tour. And we talked about doing something together for ages and never bothered. And this is just a pet project, like a little hobby project of just us driving it nowhere in particular, most of the time in a new car. It starts off as being like a review of the car, and then we get sidetracked regularly by various things. And we put out an episode every week, and it's called Smith and Sniff. And the reason why it's called Smith and Sniff is because Rich Porter has a website called Sniff Petrol, which is quite a satirical car-based site, which has been going for years now. Very funny, actually. Try it if you haven't heard of it. We just decided to do this, and we committed about 2 years ago to doing an episode every week. It's quite hard. And for at least, let me think. Yeah, at least a year we didn't make any money. We lost money. The last year we've broke even. So almost at the point where it's a business. But we're neither of us a businessman. So, we're trying to sort of build it up a bit. We're going to do more classic cars, and we've got a plan to hopefully have some guests here and there, some occasional guests. But really, it's just driving around, observing either stuff going on with other people's cars and other people's drives, talking about the car we're in, or eating lunch.
Yes, there's a lot of lunch eating, I noticed.
There's maybe too much lunch eating.
I think my favourite thing I've from all of the episodes I've watched was the old money 4x4s on people's road. The old money Volvos and things like that are just really, because round here you see a lot of that. Like people that have just got usually a
960. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the XC90 is like the next generation of those. I think I've noticed that there's an awful lot of people
early
that bought one of them.
XC90s.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they've been around for a while now, haven't they?
Yeah. So they're about sort of 15 years old or whatever it is, and they're still pottering around in this thing. So
I think what I like about Smith and Sniff is because, of course, Rich Porter writes like Clarkson's lines. But Rich was never on Top Gear in Vision, and he's never been on Grand Tour in Vision. But obviously, he has a huge wealth of knowledge on cars and a very sharp wit, and he likes a lot of crap cars. He loves his retro cars. I mean, he's had numerous interesting, weird old shitters.
He wrote an entire book about them and upset a lot of people.
Oh, he did, yeah. He upset me because he said the Beetle was the shittest car, and on the cover of Crap Cars was a Volvo 262 Bertoni, of which I own. So I was like, you can't do that. So we don't agree on everything, but at the same time, I think he's got a really good eye for that sort of thing. He loves a bit of British Leyland trivia. He's got his Defender, which I constantly rib him about. He's had a very clean Jag XJR a few years back, which he sold to Richard Hammond, actually. And so he's. I think the whole idea of Smith and Sniff is, well, we're actually going to develop it a bit more. We're going to start doing regular podcasts with it. Because obviously to keep the frequency up in isolation, it's the only way we can do it. But we've been planning it anyway, and we've got a couple of other ideas up our sleeve. So if you've never heard of it or seen it and you wonder what the bloody hell Johnny's talking about, just go on YouTube and type in Smith and Sniff.
If you're listening to this on YouTube, there'll probably be a link below this video for all of Johnny's
do
stuff.
it. And go to my YouTube channel, please, because it'd be nice if you turned up.
What's the future for Jonny Smith? That's my question for pretty much ending.
Well, there's a question, David. What is the future for me? This year, 2020, I've decided to take Car Pervert, my own YouTube channel, seriously and really ramp that up. And that will have a combination of old cars and new cars, tech, journeys, and a bit of kind of tinkering / barn findy nonsense. So really, it is the essence of my head, my car head. It's Car Pervert. So you'll have an electric car review, and then you'll have a barn find Allegro. Then you'll have a drive of something sensible. So there's that, and I'm going to be doing more of that. There's a couple of other YouTube channels which I'm hopefully going to be contributing to imminently. Obviously Smith and Sniff, we're going to keep doing that. There's talk of some TV, there's talk of some more Fifth Gear, and there's talk of another TV show which I can't talk about, but to be honest, the television has such a low rate of things coming to fruition. It's probably better I don't tell you, because I'll probably disappoint you anyway. But I'm still freelance, but luckily there's a good variety of stuff that I can get involved with, be it with my EV head on, my future tech head on, or be it with my historical old school machinery head on. So
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, this has been lovely. I didn't even need to use any of my emergency questions in a Richard Herring style.
I feel like I want to hear your emergency questions now.
What's the fastest you've been in a car, and what was it?
On the road or or on private property? On a racetrack, or
literally literally the top speed. So
okay, so I think that the top speed is similar on a road and on a track, because the fastest I've ever driven a road car on a road was Autobahn Germany, Audi RS6 Plus, which was back then twin turbo V8, and I had to take it back from Anglesey to Audi HQ in Ingolstadt, and it was de-restricted, and I got 186 out of that.
That's terrifying.
which was rather quick, and I really enjoyed that. And yeah, I think I might have frightened a pair of Spanish gents in a Ferrari who did give me the thumbs up after a while and realised that this car with a dog guard was not fucking about. And then so that was fun. That was a long time ago, 2004. And then the fastest I've ever been on a track was in Red Victor 3 with Andy Frost, obviously you'll probably know. And we did we do 7.30 well, we did the quarter mile in 7.3. I think we hit 193 miles an hour. So a very similar top speed to what I did on the road, but obviously I did it in 7 seconds on a track, and it was amazing.
That's interesting. So one of my other questions is the scariest car you've ever been in. Now, for me, both those things would have been absolutely terrifying, probably as a passenger. But you seemed like you enjoyed them. So
well, I quite like I quite like trying to tame the lion. I quite like cars that are a bit vicious. So it's part of it for me. The Red Victor 2 was amazing and quite terrifying. Red Victor 3 was terrifying because we had a tank slapper, and Andy nearly had to pull the chute out to straighten it up. That was interesting.
That's terrifying. Brown trousers moment.
Brown trousers. Yeah, I mean, my Enfield wasn't that scary. Weirdly, I'd like to tell you it was, but I think we did actually build it quite well, and it on the road it was awful. It was skitty in the wet, bloody hell, because it was only 9 feet long and 1,000 horsepower. Well, I mean, I've crashed a Dodge Viper, which is a story which in fact, I've got to write about that story for Modern Classics magazine imminently.
Oh, there we go.
There's
a thing to look out for.
I have a column that's about to start in Modern Classics. So
lovely.
Yeah, I crashed a Dodge Viper when they were brand new, SRT10. It had like about 500 miles on the clock, and I destroyed it. And it was not a great moment for Jonny Smith. I'm going to put it like that.
Well, it sounds like it's a great story, so we'll look out for Modern Classics and give some love to those guys. Thank you very much for your time, Jonny. I think we'll probably have to do this again, to be honest. There's more questions, and we can delve into EV a little bit, I feel, seeing as it's definitely a pet subject of Simon, who is one of the admins of Retro Rides as well. I think maybe there's a round table there of some sort. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this. This has been absolutely excellent. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure. And any questions? The door is always open, David.
Oh, lovely.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Digital door and real door, maybe.
And real door, yeah. When we're allowed out again.
When we're allowed out again, quite.
Yeah. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. We'll be back with another episode probably at some point in the vague Retro Ride schedule, because that's how we work. Bye.